Right, cue the camera. All right, welcome to the Town of New Ipswich Candidates Night. We're not limiting questioners or attendees to just New Ipswich. It's for any voter in New Hampshire. So welcome. My name is Bob Rodborough, and the selected have asked me to host this event. Please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much for your participation here this evening. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Emergency exits are on the side walls and at the rear of the auditorium. When you go out the rear of the auditorium, please proceed to the left, unless there's smoke in front of you, in which case go to the right, and then hang another right when you hit the restrooms. And there are restrooms out the back of the auditorium to the right. First door on your right, I think, is the faculty restrooms. At the end of the hall, there are both men's and women's restrooms available. Smoking is not permitted in any school building nor on school property. Please silence your cell phones unless you're expecting a very important call. I want to thank and acknowledge the help of the police and fire departments, the election officials, the school officials, the custodial staff here at the high school for their efforts, and we'll get on with it as soon as we go through one more item here. Voting on the articles on the official ballot will take place on September 13th. That's a Tuesday, 2 weeks from today. It'll be in the Messini Auditorium for New Ipswich voters. So please enter from the rear of the building if you're new to the process. We'll have a format of each candidate has 10 minutes. They can use their 10 minutes however they like. They can speak for 5 minutes and take 5 minutes of questions. So I encourage you to ask questions. If they want to speak for 10 minutes, they can. And then maybe after every candidate has had their 10 minutes, we'll open it up for additional questions. So if there are no other questions, we'll start with the top of the ballot. And we'll go with Karen Testerman. Karen, if you come up. I can say Karen is running for governor on the Republican ballot.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, and it's nice to see all of you here tonight. And I'm excited that New Ipswich decided to have a candidate tonight. And so my name is Karen Testerman, and I grew up in California. And when my husband was in the military, one of our very first assignments was in New England, and we just fell in love with this part of the country and vowed to come back. So after his service, we have 4 children and 12 grandchildren. We managed to find a way to come to New Hampshire, which was really exciting, and I had no idea of the political landscape of New Hampshire, because when I got here I was still raising children, and being a mom of 4 and a grandmother for 12, that's very, very important to me. One of the things I did when I first got here was I was looking for a family policy council, because the high school at Amherst was being built, and I started seeing red flags going up left and right, and I wanted to know if there was someone who had been assessing how public policy was going to be affecting my family. And so there wasn't one, and I ended up founding Cornerstone Policy Research in 2000. We came in 1993. We lived in Mount Vernon for a while, went to church over in Peterborough, and then progressed up into Franklin, where we currently live, and I served as a city councilor there. One of my passions is that we need to put God back in not only New Hampshire, but in America again. The problem we have, I guess we would call it the advantage that we have as Americans, as the land of opportunity, is the fact that we were founded on godly principles. And until we restore those godly principles, we can't really ask Him to bless us anymore. So we need to put God back into our schools, into our homes, and into our state. I am a strong constitutionalist. I helped to found the Center for Constitutional Studies in New Hampshire, and I also worked to expose the election fraud that has been going on. I started that in 2000, and it continues on today. I am an advocate for sticking with the Constitution and protecting your rights. I am a former educator. I was a certified educator as well. So that's my background. As far as the state and what I would like to do with it, over 40% or 50% of our state budget, it comes from federal dollars. And those federal dollars come with strings attached, which is why we have critical race theory in our schools. It's why we have social emotional learning in our schools. And the latest one that the federal government is now touting is one trusted adult. That one trusted adult will be in all of our public schools for every child so that they will be ready to learn. We don't know what the qualifications are for that one trusted adult, and we are driving a huge wedge between our families, the parents, and our children. So there are other factors that are governed by those federal dollars, and so I want to have a complete audit of all federal dollars coming into the state, and I want to see how we can eliminate and get away from using those federal dollars. I'm strongly pro-life. I have supported the crisis pregnancy centers and New Hampshire Right to Life for many, many years. I believe that we need to enforce the Constitution of New Hampshire, which says that we will protect and defend life, or defend and enjoy life, let's put it that way. And our platform for the Republican Party, believe it or not, says that life begins at conception until natural death, and I am fully support that as well. So that's a little bit more about me. I'm PAC, so I am strongly an advocate of the Second Amendment. I do believe that it is important that we know our state constitution better than we know our federal constitution, because our state constitution in the first part has 39 Bill of Rights. And unless you know what your rights are, you can't defend yourself. And so when we have the threat of the FBI showing up on your doorstep, and that's happened to some people here in New Hampshire, for having parts of the firearms that they want to put together as a learning experience for themselves, when the FBI shows up at your door, you need to be able to turn around and say, no, thank you, you're not allowed here, and don't answer any questions at all. Just send them on their way, or unless they have a warrant, they have no right to be there. But that's just an example of why you need to know what your rights are. So I'd like to open it up for questions, because I really want to know what's on your mind.
What is your stance on ESG? They call it environmental, social, and governance. I call it evil, satanic globalization.
And that's a good description. She wants to know what my stand is on ESG. ESG is a way of monitoring us and putting us all on the cryptic, what do I want to say, cyber track of everything. They want us to completely transform everything that we're doing away from paper money into cryptocurrency, away from that, you know, do everything you can online. We want you to apply for your jobs online. We want you to look, when you're dealing with your communities, they want you to file things online. It's not necessarily going to happen here in New Ipswich, but it does happen in some of the bigger cities. And when they do that, they're going to be able to track us on every little thing that we do. Eventually, it could come down to, well, if you haven't had a vaccination, or you're not wearing your mask, or you haven't complied with this in some other area, then we're not going to let you buy your food, your gas, or to carry on your regular business. We already see that in the hospitals right now, where if you don't comply with their way of doing business, then you cannot come in, and you're denied your medical care. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
What is your stand on the separation of church and state?
So the separation of church and state is very interesting. It was something that was written in a letter. So when the Pilgrims and the Puritans came to the United States, or at that time to the New World as English citizens, they came here because they wanted religious freedom. They didn't want the state to tell them what denomination they had to behave just to. They also didn't want someone else telling them how they were supposed to be raising their children, because parents were the primary stakeholders. And along about 1850s is the first time that that particular phrase showed up in a public publication. And the problem with, that we are led to believe is that there's supposed to be a complete diversity of everything. But when New Hampshire was first founded, in order to hold public office, you had to be an inhabitant, you had to own land, you had to pay your taxes, you had to be a Protestant, a male, and you had to believe in Jesus Christ. So, and this is true in almost all of the colonies at that time. Now, when we look at it, it's not a separation from church. It is not to allow us to tell our people what denomination they have to live in. Does that answer your question? So I believe that you have a right to exercise whatever religion you want to, right? But it doesn't mean that you have to not have it in public situations. Because if you're going to outlaw a Christian religion, you have to also outlaw humanism. There are other forms of religions that are there, that are being taught in our schools right now. So if you want to be completely void of religions, then you have to probably go back to homeschooling. Yes, sir.
So when you say that you want to bring God back into the schools and into the state, what about those that don't believe in God? Are you trying to bring in just God, Jesus Christ into the schools and into the state? Or
If you look
God
at,
for everybody?
okay, am I trying to keep God for everybody? Am I trying to determine a religious sect? No. What I'm saying is there are godly principles upon which this nation was founded. The Golden Rule is the primary one. The Ten Commandments are all. Those, if you look at our Constitution is based on biblical principles. That's what I'm talking about.
So the way that I've understood it, because I've done some research on with what you were saying between church and separation of church and state. And the way that I understand it is kind of a little further, meaning we're not going to take our religious beliefs and make a decision and force it upon everybody else. Like, for example, the thing that we just saw with Roe versus Wade. Me personally, I think a lot of those judges use their religious beliefs to make their decision on overturning Roe v. Wade. Is that something that, and how do you separate your religious decisions from impacting your decisions on what
So let me ask you this. How do I keep them,
To me, that's separation between church and state.
right, so let me ask you this. How do you determine someone's principles that they get from their religious beliefs, whether it's in God or not? How do you separate that from the person that's making the decisions?
That's what he's asking you.
Well, I'm asking you, it's not possible to do it, in my opinion,
No,
because
it is.
you are the person that you are, and you were developed, whether you believe in the Almighty God or not, you still form your principles based on something.
Based on the betterment for the entire people,
Well,
not just what you believe in.
So,
That's the way I would do it.
well,
Is would it better everybody in the entire world and community, whatever I'm supporting if I were, a townsman?
right. Where do you think,
Would my decision impacts my town?
so what I'm talking
Might make
about,
it better for them.
when I'm talking about putting the 10 Commandments back in place, I'm talking about do not murder, do not steal,
I can agree with that.
right? Treat your neighbor as you would like to be treated, right? Those are biblical principles.
Yeah. But how do you take the church out of your decisions? How do you take the...
I can't take the church because it's my belief in God. I can't separate myself from those principles.
Time's
So
up.
thank you.
Time's up, that's good.
Oh, by the way, it's KarenTesterman.com, and I would really appreciate your vote.
Thank you, Karen. All right, do we have Julian Asiard? All right. Go on to Thaddeus B. Riley.
I go by Thad, by the way, but on the ballot it'll say Thaddeus, but my wife likes me to keep it short so folks can get through it. So thank you very much for having me. It is great to see you all. I live in Brentwood with my incredibly amazing wife, Melanie. We have 6 kids together. The oldest are graduates of Liberty University. They're out in the world living on their own dime, and so I like them a little more sometimes. We have 4 kids currently in New Hampshire Public Schools. 3 at Exeter High School, and 1 at Cooperative Middle School. I have a business background. I spent a couple of decades in leadership with companies like T-Mobile, Verizon Wireless, where I was a turnaround guy, taking those bad situations and flipping them, and I'll mention a little bit about that in a few minutes. And I've spent my time, most of my life, I served in the church, and that was what I did. And about, not quite a decade ago, we started to see issues rise up in our community, where Democrats were winning elections, a progressive narrative began in our public schools, and so I ran for school board, and I won. And I served on the policy committee and got involved, and if you go to my Facebook page, you'll see a lot of my questioning, debates, and conversations around critical race theory from years ago, before I'm a little bit of an early adopter on seeing the indoctrination of our children and what has been going on in our public schools. And that is a lot of why I'm running. I mean, there is a new group of conservative leaders that we see throughout the country that have various backgrounds. You take a Ron DeSantis down in Florida, a Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, and we look at different types of business leaders, people with unique experience that step forward into our world today with the focus and passion for doing good in their communities. Now, the beautiful thing about being a Republican right now is we can look at what is going on in our culture and our world today, and we can say, not unlike the abolitionists from the 1860s, we see definite position and moment where we are on the right side of history. Patriots, loving our country, embracing the Constitution, loving our freedoms that we have, and repelling and pushing back against a federal government that has lost its ever-loving mind, that believes in their heart that we serve at their consent. But my Constitution says the government serves at the consent of the people. That's right. That's right. So in my path to running for governor, that has been so much of the story. That was the story of my leadership with Verizon Wireless. I was a people guy. I would walk into some of the most disastrous situations that the company had seen. They'd give me a call. They'd be like, well, we just fired a bunch of leaders, and the whole place is a toxic work environment. Will you go in? Because it'll probably be the last job you'll ever have with us, by the way, because it's horrible. Then a couple months later, we'd be done. I had rehired new leaders, retrained, got refocused. And I remember one time my boss asked me, he said, that last situation was so bad. He's like, I thought it was going to be the end of your career. And I told him, I said, I had enough hope and I had enough tenacity to get the job done. We need a conservative outsider to win as governor and to lead us into 2023 and beyond. The good news is, I've never lost an election. The bad news is I've never run for governor before. So it's a little bit of a different game than running for school board. But the Democrats went on an all-out push against me when I announced I was running. And they did everything they could to get a candidate to run against me, to get the machine fired up, they used social media, and I squeaked out a victory. I got 85% of the vote. And the Democrats, a bunch of them were voting for me because they knew I cared about our kids, our community, and they knew I was passionate about it. And I have 4 kids in public schools. I'm incredibly disappointed, as usual, with the teachers' unions. I've been dealing with them for years. They endorsed Democratic candidate Dr. Tom Sherman for governor. The teachers' unions did. He sent all his kids to private school, out of state. He spent like $40,000, $50,000 to send his kids away from New Hampshire public schools. I have a living, breathing investment in my house every day. I will fight. I will fight for our freedoms, for our medical freedoms. I will fight to make sure your Constitution is respected and appreciated. And I have enough energy and tenacity to win this election. I was a guy who came out of nowhere. We're getting a ton of media coverage, a ton of enthusiasm around us. We've qualified for a debate on WMUR on September 9th at 8 p.m. We were confirmed over a week ago for that. And we are ready to roll. My campaign manager is from Trump's White House, so is another one of my advisors. That doesn't mean an endorsement. He's not endorsing anybody in New Hampshire right now. At least not me. Okay? But I want to be clear. I went out and I hired the best of the best so that we can win, so that we can do good, so that we can do good throughout the state of New Hampshire. And I believe in my heart, so many independents in this state are going to look at me as a conservative outsider who's in this to fight for good. And on November 8th, they are going to go to the polls, and they are going to be fired up to vote for somebody who lives a life like you do. And what I mean by that is this: nobody handed me anything in life, at all. When I was 12 years old, my dad lost his job. We had to sell our house and we had to move. I got my first job ever. I was a paper boy. By the way, if you're a paper boy or a paper girl, you're the last ones. My kids will never have that job. They don't do that stuff anymore, right? And then I graduated to dishwasher. I went out and got an education. Then I started choosing between a few internships in finance, and I found out that I loved working with folks. That that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be part of people's career, part of their life, and help them into a better future. So that's what I've spent my life doing. But I'm a person with a lot of hope and a lot of tenacity. I used to weigh 400 pounds. In 2009, I went to the doctor, and I had some heart problems, I was having back problems, I had sleep apnea, and I had just been diagnosed with diabetes. I looked at my youngest daughter, who was 4 at the time, and I just had this moment, and I realized from what the doctor was telling me, I was never going to be at her college graduation or her wedding. And I was very sad about that, and that moved me. And so I started learning about eating healthy, and I started to run. I ran every day for 6 months. Nobody told me about rest days, by the way. If you ever, just so you know, if ever any of your friends start running, just be like, hey, you should take a rest day. I ended up losing 150 pounds. It is important that you have a governor that has the tenacity to stand up to the woke mob, the media, and to do what's right based upon the New Hampshire Constitution, the 37 articles in the Bill of Rights, Part 2, the forms of government, which defines the job that you're going to do, And we need to stand up strong and do good. And we can do that, and we're going to get to work on day one. I'm an outsider. I don't know anything about bureaucracy and playing games. I know a lot of people who run for office are mired in bureaucracy, and this is the way I want to get stuff done. And we're going to work very hard for you as a public servant. So I think I've got about 2 minutes for questions, and I'll be around forever. Yes, ma'am. So, first of all, I do not want anyone to be forced to do something medically that they are not comfortable with. So, we have the red flag laws, and our government here in New Hampshire, we just opposed that. Governor Sununu did sign that bill after sitting on his desk way too long. So, those red flag laws from Joe Biden, where you can call the cops on your neighbor and say he had a bad day, take his guns, you can't do that in New Hampshire, okay? It's going to be the similar thing with our medical freedoms, okay? We need a new medical freedom bill that gives us a path to ivermectin, gives us a path to unique alternatives that we might need for the challenges we face as a society medically. And we need a medical freedom bill that is very specific to protect you from any type of mandates from the federal government. That is the number one thing that I'm talking about with medical freedom. I'm not concerned about what we'll do in New Hampshire. I'm much more concerned about the federal government putting that on us, putting us on our kids, and I do not want the government to be advertising for vaccines or anything like that. That's freedom of choice, and that's the way to go. Follow?
Yes, Carla. What about reproductive rights?
Reproductive rights. As far as abortion, I'm going to be a pro-life governor, without a doubt. And on day one, we're going to work on better scenarios for moms and babies. Now, we talked about the separation of church and state. Let me be clear about something. We have 1,040 churches in the state of New Hampshire. I want to get a few leaders together and ask them to work within their communities on some plans about creating something better for moms and babies in New Hampshire.
What about the dads?
What?
Where are the dads in this equation?
Well, I want the dads to be accountable in the equation, if that's the question. But I want to create a situation that when women get pregnant, they have incredible options in front of them. My mom has been part of ministries like that with unmarried women who are in their teens and helping them get housing and health insurance. Do what?
Unmarried men?
What about?
Well, they're responsible too. Last time.
Of course they are, and we have laws in place for that. We have laws in place, and we need to follow up, and law enforcement needs to do their job. We need to follow the structure of the laws that we have today to make sure that they are providing for that baby. But what I'm talking about is abortion specifically in that moment, and I want to make sure that we have the best scenario possible. We have laws in place for that now, and we do need to follow up on things, but we need to empower our law enforcement, because right now we have a 20 to 25% headcount shortage in the state of New Hampshire. So we've got officers going out when there's a gun pull and no backup. And that's happened recently outside of Hampton, and we have officers driving 45 minutes to be a backup, okay? That's not okay. We need to fill those slots, and we need to bring law enforcement up to speed, and up to full head count as soon as possible so that we have law enforcement on the ground so we can follow. Yes?
As a follow-up on the pro-life, are you allowed for any, would you allow for any exceptions?
For pro-life.
For abortions?
Let me just be very clear about that. When we talk about the life of the mother, absolutely. Without the mom, there's no baby. Okay? Absolutely. But if you're asking me, will there be a pain threshold at 15 weeks? We know science tells us that the baby feels pain at around 15 to 16 weeks. So I want to be very careful with that. But first of all, let me be clear. The governor does not make legislation. And this is a commonality mistake. Governments are not icons. The state legislator, the state reps, write legislation, the state senate approves that legislation, and that article then comes before the government. If a bill comes to my desk that is a pro-life bill, okay, with the resources we have in New Hampshire, I'm going to sign that bill.
Would you go along with a bill that would force a 10-year-old to carry a child?
Okay, first of all,
A 10-year-old, a 4th grader, go through a pregnancy that is going to rip her body apart.
so we're talking.
Or
Yeah.
that woman in the news who is carrying a child with no skull that cannot survive, that is being forced by her state to continue to bear that child that cannot survive.
When we're talking about, and I said this very clearly, when we are talking about the life of the mother, that mother, regardless of her age, is the #1 priority. Because without a mom, there's not a baby.
The mother's life is not in danger, but the child will not survive, and she is forced to go through an appalling situation, bearing a child that will not survive, to go through grocery stores pregnant, with everyone going, "Oh, you're pregnant, may I touch your belly? Oh, when is it due? Oh, when is its name?" Knowing that child has no skull and has no purpose, no possibility to survive. While everybody's beaming, "Oh, what a wonderful thing," for this dead thing she's carrying. That is heartbreaking, that is agonizing. That is a horrible thing to force somebody to go through. That is something that a person with no heart would have to force a person to live through. Amen.
Yes.
Say you're an outsider. Where did you come from and how long have you lived in New Hampshire?
I've lived in New Hampshire for 7.5 years. I'm from the Midwest. I live mostly in Dayton, Ohio. You can probably detect a little bit of an accent. It's not far from Kentucky. So that's where I spent most of my life. I did go to school in Virginia, and Verizon had moved me a couple times to take over some locations and to do some work. But most of the time I lived in Dayton, Ohio. My parents moved to Chicago for a spell. That's why I became a Bears fan. And they're horrible, by the way. So, yes.
What is your stance on CRT and the 1619 project?
Right. So critical race theory is basically, if you look at it, it's about the only theory out there that doesn't call itself a religion that has 5 tenets. I'm boots on the ground in this every day. My neighbor has a kindergartner, and I've talked about this with the media, and I checked with the dad 4 times because I keep asking him about this story. Came home from school off the bus, and for 40 minutes he cried in his mom's lap. He couldn't get the whiteness off of his skin. And that's what he was crying about. An adult at school had told him he had benefited in his life from slavery. Now, people don't want to believe this story, but that's not the only story of how it's happening across the state of New Hampshire. And we hear about it again and again and again. And this burden of guilt is beyond what children can handle. And it's not okay. In the schools, we need to be back at the crown jewel of excellence of academia that we were back when my oldest 2 kids graduated from Exeter High School in 2016 and 17. Instead, we've diverted hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, like in my district, to hire somebody who teaches DEIJ. And we're now funding groups in other parts of the state that for Outright, which is an LGBTQI organization that comes in to indoctrinate kids with no opposing views. And that just happened in Hampton. The school board just voted it in. We need to get back to robust academics. Math, science, the trades, all of it. And that should be what schools are. Instead, political ideologues have hijacked that narrative. They've gone into our schools, and I know this because I know them. And I talk to them all the time at the school board meetings, and I have for years. And this is where we need to draw a line in the sand, and education needs to be about the kids and about the teachers. And we got to get teachers out of meetings. Teachers are sitting, when I talk to teachers, I ask them so many times, if we could change one thing about your job, what would it be? And before I finish the sentence, meetings. I want to have a conversation with superintendents on day 1. I've written policy in school board, served on the policy committee. I want to know why there are teachers in meetings all day and not in front of kids like they tell me they want to be. So that's important. Yes?
I just want to follow up because you talked about the white guilt, but my problem also is the fact that we are teaching black children, black people, to be inferior to white people. I have a huge problem with that. Okay, I should not, I am just as good as the rest of you. I have a brain, I can use it. So telling me that I can't do anything because a white person has oppressed me is not healthy for black children.
And this, part of the divide we have in this is the eradication of parents in our schools. We had a bill, it got shot down. We've shot down the parents' voices. They call them domestic terrorists. So instead of hearing from folks like you at school board meetings, people get thrown out, they get ignored, and it's created this volatile temperature in our schools today. We're going to end that by honoring the parents' voices in my office through a committee called the Education Advisory Group. We're going to bring parents in who are engaged in their community, who want New Hampshire schools to be the amazing thing they were just a few years ago. We just need to get through some bureaucracy, some politics, and we can be there. And we need to value each other based on the beautiful person each of us is and what we are capable of. I've had people my whole life tell me what I'm capable of, because I didn't grow up with much sometimes. But you know what I did? I got out and fight, and I blazed my own trail. And that's what I tell my kids every single day. We blaze our own trail, and we value and love and appreciate everybody around us. And we don't put up for nothing. I spent my life, my childhood, being bullied. I was removed from 2 schools for the beatings that I took. And that's how I grew up. And I want to fight to protect those kids, whoever they are, whatever background they have. And that's what I've been doing in my community. And we're going to do that, but we can't do it without the parents. We got to do it. So my time is up like 17 times over. I'm going to hang around forever. So my wife ain't expecting me home tonight. So I'll be here. You can be happy or mad at me, and we can hang out forever. And I have breath mints in the thing too, so I'll get those before we talk. So, all right, thank you all.
All right, has Julian arrived? All right. We'll move on to positions for United States Senator, Republican Party, Don Bolduc.
This works better. 10 minutes. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to sit out here and talk to you from here because I have a vertical challenge and I can't stand behind podiums because you won't be able to see me. Plus, it's better to be in front of people as opposed to being barricaded. My name's Don Bolduc. I'm running for the United States Senate. I've been running for the last 2 years now. I've visited every town and city in the state. I've talked to Granite Staters all over this state. And I've sat with moms, and I've sat with Republicans, Independents, Democrats, Libertarians. I've sat with students of all ages. And I have come to find out that right now, for Granite Staters, the most important thing is inflation. And how that is stressing their family. And how that's creating problems for them to provide for their family. How that is interfering with their livelihood right now. I've sat with strong moms and dads who were brought to tears. Why were they brought to tears? Because they can't provide for their family in the way that they used to be able to provide for their family. And I feel that. And I understand that. Because I went through it with them. The last 2 years during COVID, we were locked down. Our freedoms were taken away from us. Our schools were closed. We lost our medical freedoms. We lost our ability to make decisions for ourselves and our families. Our family members died alone. Nobody should ever die alone. We were precluded from doing the things that we needed to do in order to support our families. Businesses were closed. Churches were closed. Now we're in an election cycle. And the very people at the local level, state level, and federal level that did that to us have not accounted for the pain that they've caused. They have not accounted for the mistakes that they made. And it's okay to make mistakes. Just account for that. They haven't taken responsibility for their actions. They haven't been transparent with you. They haven't told you the truth. And that's wrong. And that is fundamentally what's wrong with our society today. Lies have supplanted the truth. It's easier to tell a lie in our society than it is to tell the truth. People are more uncomfortable with people that tell the truth than they are with people that lie to them. And this is unfortunate because it creates divisiveness. We're more interested in figuring out what divides us than we are what brings us together. Character, integrity, hard work, dedication, love, faith, hope. All these things aren't used to bring us together. Other things like sex and race and creed and religion are used to divide us in a way that we shouldn't be dividing ourselves. We're fighting each other to the detriment of our livelihood today and the detriment of the future of our children and grandchildren. God, family, community, and country used to mean something to all of us. It used to mean something. It had a presence in our life that allowed us to move forward. We've allowed all our institutions to be undermined to the detriment of our children and grandchildren, to the detriment of ourselves. Just look, take any of them. Look at the family. It is so good to see families here. It's so good to see children sitting next to their mother, father, grandfather, guardian, whomever it is that's taking care of them and cares about them, enough to expose them to things like this. Because this is important. This is about us. Education has been undermined to the point where we're not focusing on academic excellence and preparing our children and our grandchildren for life. No, we're doing so many other things in the school that creates divisiveness among us. Why are we doing that? We're doing it because that's what gets people elected to office. We're doing it because that's what special interests want us to do and lobbyists want us to do. We're doing it because other people have an agenda for this nation that's outside the agenda of God, family, community, country. Making our community strong, living together, sharing together, taking care of each other. These are all things that are hugely, hugely important. And I'm sorry, but I don't see it. I've been retired now for four and a half years from the military. I served in 3/4 of the countries of this world. I was sent there to do the things that we valued in this country, like unity, and freedom, and liberty, so that people had something. They could have a family. They could invest in their family. They could become successful. These things I went there to do. And I went there to do it with men and women in my charge. Only to come back to this country and find out they're not valued here. And that's upsetting. And it's wrong. And if we can't figure out how to come together, if we can't figure out that our institutions are valuable, family, education, justice. Look at our justice system. It's broken. It's not fair. It's not fair to us. We're not the elite. Our families, our children aren't the elite. We'll pay the price. We'll have to go to jail. But the people above us who have created this elitism for themselves, protect themselves, and they get away with everything. And then we pay for it. Look at our political system. Our political system is a disaster. Our political system should be based on self-governance. We the people, you, in charge of your lives, with little government interference. But that's not what's happening today. We have a large government, and we have large governments at the state level and at the local level. It's all three levels that are interfering with your ability to be able to be successful. Your ability to be able to raise your family. Your ability to make inherent decisions that belong to parents, and parents alone. They have taken this government and they have made it unlimited over the last 40, 50 years. And they've done it legally, effectively, silently, gradually. But here it is, 2.9 million people, unelected bureaucrats, people that you didn't put in office, that regulate your life every day through 450 department and agencies with a written register of regulations and policies, 175,000 pages. That's not America. That's wrong. We don't need it. It's too expensive. It's weak. It's feckless. It can't protect us. Look at the crime. Look at the drugs. Look at the human trafficking. Look at the illegal firearms trafficking that's going on here, the crime rates that's surrounding us. You know, we have the same types of crimes in this country, or in this state, that every other state has. We just don't have it to the volume they have yet. We don't want it to go there. And we need change. And you make the change. Principles and values, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Teaching that young man right there to work hard. And if he works hard and we give him the opportunity to work hard, he can do anything he wants. Anything he wants. But his decisions are his own. That's accountability that we don't teach right now. Responsibility. You are responsible for your actions, not me. I shouldn't have to pay for them. But that's what we do. We make everybody else pay for people's mistakes. And it's okay to make mistakes. Trust me. I've made a lot of them. We got to be able to grow through them. We got to be able to fail, pick ourselves up, and move forward. But inside a society that provides you everything, that takes away your initiative, that's not going to happen. And we need to get back to that. We need to get back to leaders that lead, that serve, that believe they work for you and not the other way around. I've done that my whole life. I learned how to do it on our family farm in Laconia, New Hampshire, where I was born and raised. I learned how to contribute to the community. I learned it as a police officer in Laconia, New Hampshire, before I joined the military. I learned it in the military for 33 and a half years. It is something that I keep with me near and dear, and that's public service, serving you. I don't care about anything else. But we have in Washington, D.C. now, career politicians who serve special interest lobbyists, wealthy political elites, the media, and corporations. And themselves. You're absolutely right. And we have to stop that. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, establish it, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare for ourselves and our posterity. That young man, those two children back there, this young lady over here, right? Children and our grandchildren. That's my duty description. I will be your ambassador in Washington, D.C. to work for you. I don't have all the answers. I am not perfect. But I will work for you and I will work with you so that we can prosper and our children and our grandchildren have a future. Thank you and God bless you. Yeah, sure. Time for one. I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Sorry. Yep, I will.
Sir,
Yes,
going back, so you're a little familiar with TRICARE, I assume?
Yes, sir.
You're in the military. What is your stance, and why or why not would you push for a bill for something like TRICARE that's free for Medicare for everybody?
For Medicare for everybody?
Medical care for everybody.
Medical care for everybody.
Similar to TRICARE is for the military.
Similar for TRICARE. Are you happy with TRICARE?
When I had it, yeah.
Yeah?
I wasn't.
I'm not.
No.
I know my wife isn't. I'm not happy with my veterans care. I'm 100% disabled, and I'm not happy with that.
It's better than nothing.
Yes, but so is private industry. If we allow them to compete, if we deregulate, if we let them compete so that we lower our deductibles, so we lower our policies. It's the government's involvement that has raised the cost of medical care. 16% is what we were paying, the government was paying for medical care before Obamacare, before the Affordable Care Act. It's now at 24% and growing. The government in education, in family business, in the economy, in small businesses, in anything, costs us more money and doesn't do us any favors. And so no, I am not for Medicare for all. I'm not, and I won't be. I am for quality medical care that comes from private industries that are allowed to compete against each other in order to bring prices down. Yes, ma'am.
What are you going to do about the strategic oil reserve? Our tanks and our planes do not run on solar. Why are we dumping our strategic, keyword strategic, oil reserve all over the U.S.?
Well, you know, if we were using our strategic reserve for a crisis in the United States, that would be good, but we're not. We're sending it to China. That's where it's going. Did you know that?
You know, it is.
It's going to China.
There's a portion going to China,
And there's some going here.
and there's some going to Europe.
But if we would just reverse the executive orders that President Biden put in place with the XL pipeline, with exploration, with drilling, with leases, we would not be energy dependent right now. We would be energy independent, and we wouldn't have to touch our strategic reserves. It's a matter of policy. It's a matter of executive orders, and the Congress has the full authority to reverse those. And that's what I want to do. And as probably the senator that's going to be the 51st senator, I will get that vote, right, on the Republican side to reverse all these things that are creating the inflation. Because that's what's creating the inflation, our energy dependence and these executive orders, which I think are actually unconstitutional, to be honest with you. But we'll fix it with legislation. 3 priorities: economy, out of control spending, our debt, because we're mortgaging our grandchildren and children's future, and the safety and security of Americans. Yes, ma'am.
You're talking about pipelines.
Yes, ma'am.
When we were fighting on energy and Ken Morgan and Liberty Utilities, who were trying to put a transformer through our town and state, they were not. Those pipelines were not being built for us. They were being built to send to Nova Scotia,
Right.
to be shipped out in tankers to Asia and Europe.
Well, I'll tell you where I was. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Because I
I
fought
thought you
it
were done.
for 3 years. I fought it.
Yeah.
And I went around the country, and I was stuck, and I talked to people around the country.
Well, I was serving.
They reversed the pipeline from Drayton, Massachusetts to Nova Scotia. It went from Nova Scotia to Drayton at one point, so that they could put that gas through our state, take our homes, take our land away from us, and ship all that stuff to out of the country. And it had nothing to do with the government. It had to do with the fossil fuel industry, whose CEOs are sitting on billions and billions of dollars and taking our homes and our gas and our oil away from us and shipping it out of this country. It has nothing to do with the government. It has something to do with the fossil fuel industry. What are you going to do about that?
Well, first of all, to answer the first part of your question, you asked where I was. I was serving my country, allowing you to have the opportunity to fight these issues at the local level and state level like you're supposed to. You're talking about issues that aren't at the federal level. What I will do is give you the opportunity and the freedom to continue to fight these things that you don't want going through your state. That is your purview. You don't want the federal government in that business, do you?
They weren't
Do you?
doing it. It was corporations.
Corporations with the permission and the support of federally elected, state elected, and local elected officials that you put there. You got to stop electing these people that support corporations that want to do this to you if you don't like it. That's what you need to do. It's on you. Don't put it on me. Thank you.
All right, we'll do one more call for Julian. All right. Are there any candidates here for Congress? All right. Any candidates here for executive council? Any candidates for state senator? All right. Diane Kelly, are you present? Well then, come on down.
I too am vertically challenged, but that's okay. I am the current state rep. I am running for my second term. I hate public speaking, so I'm going to keep this very brief. I got a 100% score with the House Republican Alliance. I am very much in favor of saving babies, keeping taxes low, keeping spending low, medical freedom, any of those things, and I really don't like public speaking, so I'm going to call it good.
I just have a question about the illegal immigration. I keep hearing about this current administration is quietly busing and sending people on planes to different cities and towns throughout the United States full of illegal immigrants. I call them aliens like we used to, call me old-fashioned, but these illegal aliens are being put into our communities and we're expected to pay for them. I would like to know what the state of New Hampshire is doing, because I don't want to pay for them. I'm having a hard time right now paying to put gas in my car to go to work and to buy groceries. I don't feel that it's my responsibility to pay for them. So what is the state going to do about that?
I am with you on that, and I would hope that the legislature would have some ability to deal with it, but what we found last term was that the legislature wanted to do all kinds of things, and we were blocked by many problems, and I don't want to name names, but we were blocked from doing things that I would very much like to do, and I agree with you, I would like to address that. Go ahead.
Question on medical freedom that you spoke and said that you were in favor of. Does that mean you were pro-choice?
Could you speak a little louder?
Yeah. You mentioned that you were for medical freedom. Where do you stand on pro-choice? Because that to me is medical freedom.
I think that in terms of abortion and reproductive rights and choice, you have every right to do what you want with your body. However, what I have found to be the case is that when you're pregnant, there's another body involved, and I think that if you don't want to be pregnant, we live in wonderful modern times where there's such things as birth control and abstinence and all sorts of things. So I think that you have every right to do what you want with your body, but as soon as there's another body involved, you lose the right to get rid of that body.
What about in cases of rape? What about in cases of rape?
You know, that gets talked about a lot. I know we were talking earlier about the 10-year-old child, and the only thing I can think to say about it is that when there are extreme cases, it should be something that could be maybe taken to court or something and discussed as an extreme case. But I find that people who are pro-choice or pro-death, in my opinion, keep bringing up those things. Is that they're very, very rare, and that hundreds and thousands and downright millions of babies are dying for those few cases that are really not typical. If rape happens, and that's an issue there are such things as, what's that, 3-day pill or whatever, that can be dealt with. But for the most part, I just feel like we keep addressing these rare cases where what I want to talk about is the millions of babies who aren't those rare cases, who are being murdered through no fault of their own. Everybody's worried about women's rights. What about the women who aren't allowed to be born because they're murdered before they're given a chance to live?
vote today and why?
I
Why
would.
not? Why or why not?
Right, I would, and I know a lot of people disagree with it, but I think that at this point, we have only to look at what's going on in Washington. The federal government has run amok. There is the so-called swamp, the FBI, the CIA. It's insane, and I don't see that it could ever really happen. I don't see it happening, but people always say, oh, it wouldn't work because we couldn't support ourselves. Well, New Hampshire sends more money to the federal government than we take in.
And you know it's against the Constitution to file a war about that, it's called treason.
And that's not true. We get $1.32 for every dollar we send to the federal government.
I didn't hear what you said. I'm super hard of hearing. I have hearing aids and I still can't hear.
Seceding from the country is against the Constitution, we file a war against that, and it's called treason.
I think that's not really the case, but I suppose it's how you look at it, and I don't see it that way.
The Civil War, because they broke out, they tried to break away from the country, it's called treason to...
I don't really see it that way. I think that if you look at the New Hampshire Constitution,
The federal Constitution, it's against the law to secede.
well, that certainly is your right to believe that, but I don't believe it is. I think that we have the right to the government that we want, and right now, I don't want what's going on in Washington.
We haven't met before, but I'm actually one of the speak out against you, and you're pretty much the main thing that motivates me. Your vote for regular secession to the Hampshire voters. My question is, I've seen you since then pledge allegiance to the flag twice. I've seen you say pledge allegiance to the flag twice since then, both at Temple Town Hall and tonight. If you're pledging allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, how can you support secession from that country?
Because I think that the whole point of America is that we are free to believe as we want, to vote as we want, and to get the government we expect. And I think that what the government we have now is not what I expected and not what I wanted. When we joined the Union, when New Hampshire joined the Union, we weren't being ruled by the FBI and the CIA. We had rights. We had Second Amendment rights.
Then why do you continue to say the pledge of allegiance to our flag?
Because I believe in the American right to vote as we want, to do within, except for harming other people, to do as we want.
So if we left the United States, would you still pledge allegiance to the flag?
If we left,
If we left the United States, if we seceded, would you still pledge allegiance to the flag?
no, if we seceded, we would not be part of the Union, and I would not. Just out of curiosity, what's your name?
Like the word.
Mike?
Okay. I was just curious.
Are we really talking about like leaving the country, like secession? Like, is this serious?
Yes.
Like you really voted for that?
I didn't vote to secede. I voted to give the right. I voted for the people to be able to discuss it. People, our voters, our citizens
Okay,
have
but
the right to discuss it.
what I'm
So
understanding is you're for that.
I did not vote to secede. I voted for.
Are you for that? Yes or no? It's a very simple
No, it
question.
really isn't. It's kind of complicated, and I would need to look
Are
at
you
what's going on.
voting, would you support New Hampshire leaving the United States? Yes or no?
If the conditions
Yes
were
or
right.
no?
Some things aren't yes or no.
Yes, they are. If you're running for office and you are supporting leaving the country, it is a yes or no.
Exactly how come people can vote to say it's okay to abort babies under certain conditions, but not others or whatever, like just for
Okay,
rape or
we're talking
whatever.
about succession
There are
from
questions
the
that are
United
yes or
States.
no. There
But
are questions
no,
that
this
are
is,
yes
let's
or no.
stay on topic.
No.
You're
Point of
seriously,
the topic
you are
is there are
thinking,
questions that
you,
are.
no,
thought people had the right to discuss.
No, I'm asking your opinion. I don't care about what you voted the right to discuss it. Okay, fine. But would you support leaving the United States?
In certain conditions, I might. I would want to talk it over with other citizens as well.
Okay, that's pretty sad, but okay.
She answered yes to my question.
You spoke about how there are millions of babies that are
I can't hear.
Can you speak louder, please?
I'm sorry.
You spoke about how there are millions of babies being murdered and there's nothing being done about it. Do you recognize, first part of the question is, do you recognize the difference between a fetus and a baby?
Recognize.
Between the
See the
fetus and the
difference
baby.
between a fetus and a baby.
You see a difference between a fetus and a baby, that's what she's asking.
I think a life begins at conception.
Okay, and then the other side of my question is, what about all of the women who suffer either complete life-changing problems due to carrying children that if had been, if they had had an abortion, they wouldn't have had such trauma done to their bodies? And what about all of the
Are you talking about cases of rape?
No, I'm talking about like maternal mortality in our country and the fact that
Maternal mortality.
maternal mortality.
Oh. Well, if you have a condition that causes you to not be able to carry a baby, isn't it your responsibility to keep from conceiving one?
Well, that's
Like an ectopic of pregnancy.
Anybody who gets raped does not have control over that, first of all. Secondly, one might not know that they have a condition that would lead to perhaps them dying or having life-altering effects.
So all of these babies have to die to make exceptions for these few cases. Why don't we have some sort of system in place where we can go either to a court or some sort of situation and say,
Well, because you said that we're free to do what we want.
with your own body, with your body.
Right. When I was pregnant with these guys, it was my body, and I chose to keep my children, obviously, and I love them, and they're wonderful. And personally, I can't imagine ever bringing myself to have an abortion, but I don't look down upon others who have. And there are many, many conditions, especially in the South, and where people don't have access to the health care that we have here in New England, where mothers are dying. Mothers are having their lives completely.
So here again, we're killing thousands and literally millions of babies for these rare cases you keep
These
bringing
are not
up.
rare cases. These are not rare cases.
Do you actually know what the percentage?
We're probably not going to agree, so
No, that's fine, but you need to recognize the fact that carrying a baby is a trauma to a woman's body.
Do you have some numbers
So
and
don't get
statistics to back this up?
It's not that simple. I'm sorry, what?
You have some numbers and statistics to back this up? Where's your information from?
As far as,
Thank you, Diane. All right, next we have Michael Deloria from the Democratic Party running for state representative.
Hi. It's like 20 degrees hotter up here, I think, than it was over there. So I'm Mike Deloria. As you heard, I got motivated to vote when I saw that secession vote. I very strongly believe that while we may disagree on a lot of policies in our country, how politicians are handling things, I think first and foremost, we're all Americans.
That's right.
So a little bit about me. I grew up here in New Hampshire. I was born in Florida. I did the upgrade when I was about 2 years old. I grew up in foster care. I lived in a group home for 3 years. Bounced from foster homes, different families. When I was in high school, I had friends who would take me in for a couple months at a time. until I graduated. I graduated a semester early, worked for 9 months until I went to college, went to Southern New Hampshire University, got my bachelor's degree in 2009. 2009 was a very busy year for me. Also got married, had a baby, all three of these things within 2 months of each other. Graduating in the height of the recession was not easy. Even with the bachelor's degree, I had trouble finding work. We ended up being homeless for 4 months or so. I was finally able to find work. We got our own place, went back to school, got my master's degree. And since then, every couple of years, we move, we upgrade. 2.5 years ago, we were able to buy our first home in Temple. We love it here, and this is where we plan to stay. My experiences getting that help throughout my life is kind of where my policies on government came from. I believe that a little bit of help can make a world of difference in someone's life, so I believe in policies that are going to help people. I believe the government should be there to give people a life raft if they're drowning, if they're about to sink. I don't think we should be left to sink or swim on our own. I think our policies should be geared towards helping those people climb out of those holes and improve their situation. That worked for me. I did, when we had our child, we got food stamps, we got WIC. The difference between having to buy those cans of formula every week versus getting that help from the state really made a difference in us paying our bills for that period of time. While I don't get any assistance now, I do recognize that sometimes people need it, and I think we should be there to give that to people. So that's pretty much everything what my viewpoints are based on. I think any legislation I vote on is going to be based on whether I think this is going to help people or not. I think it's important to know how we're going to pay for things. Budgets are very important, but I essentially think that helping people is more important than paying for something right away. Yeah, I mean, I guess, is there any questions for me? Yeah.
So what is your stance on critical race theory and the 1619 project in schools?
So I don't know the exact specifics of what's teaching. I'm not in a classroom. I do think it is important to teach about our country's history. I don't think it's right to make people feel guilty for something they had no part of, but I do think they should be informed about what happened in our history. Learning about our history is important to prevent it from happening again. And I think we have people in place, we have people running schools, running our boards of education, that they can decide exactly what to teach. But I think it is important to learn about our history.
Good. I'd like to follow up
Sure.
to that, please. The 1619 project is not based on actual historical documents. So how is that proper to be teaching in schools? We have historical documents, and whether it's in the National Archives, they're in museums, that even people have them in their homes. So why teach something that we do not have something to back that up?
So like I said, I'm not familiar with the 1619, I'm sorry, whatever it is, I'm not sure what it is, but I also think we can't just rely on documents. History is written by the winners.
Yes.
So getting the opposing side is important in almost any situation.
Yes.
So where is it coming from then?
I
Because
mean,
who is living now that was here 250 or 300 years ago?
have you never been told stories from ancestors, from grandparents, great-grandparents? I think stories are passed on from generation to generation. That's definitely a
Yeah,
way
the
that
fish
information
stories,
comes
things
down.
get bigger and bigger and bigger.
I don't disagree with that, but the general premise is they're telling their story, their reality.
Yes.
What about the truth?
What's your view on Second Amendment?
So I do tend to veer a little bit compared to most Democrats. I'm a gun owner myself. I have a shooting range in my backyard. I do believe in your right to bear arms, but I also believe that there are some concessions we can make to help save lives. I'm for things like enhanced background checks. I'm for things like requiring safety courses. I am okay with mental health checks. And one thing that I do tend to be a little more extreme on that will lose a lot of Republican support on is I would be willing to sacrifice magazine capacity to prevent the ability for a shooter to fire off 150 rounds in the hundred. Yes.
We can't hear you.
People like me who work really hard, and I struggled to take care of my children because I was busy paying for yours. The problem with helping people this way is that you're taking from taxpayers who are trying to take care of their own people.
So first off, I don't remember getting a check from you. But yes, I do think that we pay money into the federal government, and that money, some of that money can be put towards helping people. We spend billions and billions of dollars on things that I don't necessarily agree with. Why can't we spend some money on helping people who need it? I don't think people should be left to sink or swim. We have problems like homelessness in our country. A lot of that has to do with people not being able to get the help that they need. And if we can help people a little more, maybe we can prevent some of that.
Yes.
Personal responsibility.
You want to leave the
Personal
country.
responsibility only goes
You
so
want to
far.
leave the country.
Personal responsibility only goes so far. When a big corporation is able to hire someone, and we don't have laws in place saying how much they have to pay people, they will take advantage of that and pay very low. You know what happens to those people? Do you know what happens to those people? Those people have to go get aid from the government. And the government is basically subsidizing those big corporations to pay us less so they can increase their profits. So taxpayers are essentially paying for those profits, those investors to make billions of dollars every year instead of putting that money towards helping people.
The Northeast in California, we pay most taxes in this country. We take care of those states like Kentucky, who has the highest welfare rate in the country, and it's led by Mr. McConnell and the Republicans. Why should we support Kentucky? That's what he's saying. Why should we support the Republicans that are all collecting welfare and everything in that state when they have the highest welfare rate in the country?
We can't hear the question.
It was more of a statement.
Oh, okay. Okay.
She was saying politicians in states like Kentucky are getting different types of welfare. Why should we pay for that and not help ordinary citizens?
Each state does its own welfare, doesn't it?
To a degree, but we also receive federal dollars.
You don't get any welfare like you do down there in Massachusetts, so tell me the federal government's got anything to do with that.
They don't run it, first of all. They do contribute to it, but they don't pay for everything. They don't run it.
Hi, thank you. So I have a question for you on your support or not support of public education, but just to clear the room for the rest of the evening, we can focus our questions. I'm one of 5 people who voted on the program of studies in the scenic district. Critical race theory is nowhere near our education of our children. It's not part of any curriculum I've ever seen or I've approved as one of the 5 board members. How do you feel about public education, and are we doing enough at the state level to fund it adequately amongst our state?
I don't think we're doing enough. I think it's very important to not only pay teachers more, but give them more in their budget to buy supplies for their classroom. I think no teacher should have to pay out of pocket to teach lessons that they have to do. And, I don't think, on top of that, I'm against the voucher program that allows people to take public dollars and bring it into private institutions or drive to another city. Most of those people who are going to take advantage of that system are from inner city, and we can't be taking dollars from inner city schools to go to a school like a Bedford that receives plenty of money. And I mean, the only people who are going to be able to take advantage of that program are the people who are already in an okay space financially. Most lower income families are not going to be able to drive their kids to a school halfway across the state to take advantage of the voucher programs. If the buses aren't going to take them there, their kids aren't going to be able to make it. We need to keep that money in the schools that the population lives.
So, like yourself, you took advantage of the opportunity to use the government help to move up.
Yes.
Yourself. So that you use the system for what it was meant to be used.
Correct.
I'm not necessarily opposed to something like that. But what are you going to do to work the place to make sure that people don't use that system to create a lifestyle?
So I see what you're saying. So he's asking what would I do to prevent people from taking advantage of those welfare programs? And honestly, I don't think there's any scenario where you can completely get rid of people taking advantage of the system. There's always going to be people who, I mean, no matter what you're doing, people work under the table all the time to prevent paying taxes. People lie on their welfare application forms to get more money. There's not anything you can do to completely get rid of it, but I don't think that's an excuse to not help the people who need it, just for the small percentage where you can take advantage of the system. I do think it's a small percentage.
When there are generations of families going onto the system, you think that that's a small percentage?
So I think that is a possibility, but I think that is a very small minority of what actually happens. The majority of people who are taking advantage of these welfare programs are people who just need a little bit of help to get where they want to be.
So would you put a timeline on it?
I think to be honest, I think there are timelines in place for a lot of the programs. I know when we were accepting assistance, there were timelines for just about everything that we applied for. So I'm not completely familiar with the system. I was only receiving aid for about a year to a year and a half. So I'm not an expert on the system. I would be open to speaking to people and learning more. I'm always willing to learn more and not only hear people who agree with me, but people who don't agree with me. I like getting suggestions from other people, and if something makes sense and I think it'll help people, then I would support it. I'm sorry, they told me that was the last one. Thank you very much. All right, now on the Republican side for state representative, we have Jim Kofod.
Thank you. I want to thank the organizers and everybody who helped put this together this evening. I guess first of all I want to explain a little bit about the redistricting and why suddenly you're seeing people from Wilton show up in New Ipswich. Every 10 years, the legislature is charged with redrawing the districts throughout the state. I am currently a state representative in Wilton, representing Wilton, Lineborough, Greenville, and Francistown. Going forward, those districts have been redrawn, and Wilton and Temple and New Ipswich are together. So, as a sitting state rep, I am hoping to get your vote in the upcoming primary election. So we actually have 4 Republicans running for 3 seats in the primary. And I genuinely can't say anything negative about any of them. I think they're all good people and would be good votes. But I'm proud of my voting record, and I really want to run on my positive record. So, in addition to being a state representative, I am on the Wilton Lineborough Cooperative School District Board. I started out on the school budget committee a couple of years ago. We had some spending going through the roof and some concerns about not spending wisely necessarily all the time. So I got involved with the budget committee. I eventually ran for the school board, and earlier this year I was elected to the chair of the school board. I'm pleased that what we've been doing there really is focusing on improving academics, trying to be very focused on how we can help the kids in the schools and the families who bring their kids to those schools, and focus on academics while making sure that we spend money wisely. And I think, like many districts, we're spending over $20,000 per student. We have, I think, used money very wisely in keeping the schools open when a lot of schools were closing around the holidays of 2020, late 2020, when there were a lot of concerns about people quarantining after the holidays. We managed to keep our schools open, and I think that was reflected in test scores remaining higher than, or let's say, not declining as much as they did elsewhere throughout the state and throughout the country. I want to talk a little bit about some of the accomplishments that we've achieved in the past 2 years. In the theme of lowering taxes and spending, we reduced the statewide education property tax by $100 million, affecting everybody's tax rate statewide, benefiting everyone, without taking that money away from the schools. So that did not take any money away from school funding, but it did lower everybody's tax bill. We reduced the meals and rooms tax to 8.5%. We phased out the interest and dividends tax. And this is being phased out over 5 years, but this is one that adversely affects elderly people who are on a fixed income, who have fixed investments, are very adversely affected by the interest and dividends tax. So we're phasing that out over 5 years, and we're pretty proud of that. We reduced the business profits tax and the business enterprise tax. As you know, businesses look to tax rates, and there is a competitive environment across different states. It keeps us competitive in the Northeast for jobs coming to New Hampshire. We also exempted state businesses from paying tax on their PPP loans that they got from the federal government. So this was a big issue and a big concern that was raised following the PPP loans, which really ended up being grants. And we wanted to make sure that businesses didn't get penalized for that money that was really there to keep them afloat. We also have allocated $15.6 million for wastewater grants throughout the state, $59.7 million for highway block grants and to municipalities, and $13.6 million for bridge aid and road maintenance, also to municipalities. So my priorities as a state representative, like some of the other Republicans that you've heard, is really about limited government, low taxes and low spending, personal freedoms, and quality education. I have strongly supported our Second Amendment. I was co-sponsor on a bill that closed a loophole in the Fish and Game law around the right to carry a firearm while snowmobiling. I have also, as a member of the Health and Human Services Committee, I've been sort of an adamant champion of freedom, especially around vaccine mandates. This is something that we spent quite a lot of time discussing. I was also co-sponsor on a bill that would have made ivermectin available essentially over the counter through standing orders to anybody in New Hampshire who wanted it. And we also protected physicians who want to prescribe drugs off-label. This is something that happens all the time, but for some reason it became a big issue during COVID when a lot of physicians were censured, punished, or fired for prescribing things that they believed work, that they saw working, such as ivermectin. So we passed a bill that essentially said you can prescribe off-label and you can't be punished for it. So we're letting doctors make those decisions with their patients. I also have been very strong on constitutional rights, generally speaking. One of the things that came up in 2021 that was rather shocking was that the Superior Court issued an opinion stating that during a state of declared emergency, a governor of New Hampshire may limit or suspend constitutional rights. And that shocked me, and I think it shocked some other people, and we wanted to be clear that no matter which side of the aisle that governor is on, they cannot limit or suspend your constitutional rights. So we had a bill that really started out as a religious liberty bill. We ended up modifying that in response to the Superior Court's opinion. That was House Bill 440. And essentially it just says, no, you can't. Your constitutional rights are your constitutional rights. They are sacrosanct. You cannot limit or suspend them during a declared state of emergency, period. So I'm proud to say that that bill passed. The governor signed it into law earlier this year, and we have clarified the emergency power statute.
Yes. Yes.
So I wanted to mention some of the endorsements and scores I've gotten because I think it's you know, depending on which side of the political aisle you're on, you may appreciate what I have to say or you may not. But I did get a 100% score from the House Republican Alliance. I got a 99% from the Granite State taxpayers. Would have been 100, but I had to go to a school board meeting and run for chair. I have been endorsed by Cornerstone. I got early endorsements from both Cornerstone and Americans for Prosperity, which is very focused on economic vitality and economic freedom. I have been endorsed by the National Rifle Association. I got an A+ from the New Hampshire Firearms Coalition. I also have received personal endorsements of Executive Councilor Dave Wheeler, former House Speaker Bill O'Brien, Executive Director of Cornerstone Shannon McGinley, Senator Gary Daniels, and Senator Kevin Agard. So I'm pretty proud of those endorsements as well. I hadn't planned on talking about this, but I want to add a note about divisiveness because I think that we're in a very precarious situation as a country, and we've got a lot of issues that people feel very passionately about. When we engage others, particularly when I engage others at the State House, there are some who enter into that conversation with fists clenched and raised and ready for a fight. I have worked to try to engage people from the other side of the aisle in conversation. And what I have found is that when you look somebody in the eye and you treat them as a human being, and you are willing to listen to what they have to say, even if you don't agree with it, there's a lot more you can get done. So I have tried to be that voice, and there was, one of the bills that I spoke on was House Bill 1431. Somebody mentioned it earlier, this was the Parents' Bill of Rights. Parents' Bill of Rights hit a snag because there were LGBT groups that were especially concerned that if schools are required to share this information about conversations they're having with a student who's transitioning their gender, then they have to out that student to their parents. And I spoke in favor of that bill because I think that parents need to be involved with their upbringing. And I think that our default position ought not to be a distrust of parents. My concern is that with the tenor we have in our society today, there is distrust in both directions. I support public education, and I am on my school board because public education is what made this country prosperous. I also support school choice. You may not be happy about hearing that, but my position is I want our public schools to be the best they can possibly be, not because they're the only choice that a student has, but because they are the best choice. So I believe in fostering trust in both directions. That's what I spoke for when I was on the House floor speaking on behalf of, in support of House Bill 1431. I expect it will come back, I hope it passes, and I hope that we can discuss it in a way that's respectful to everyone involved. So that's who I try to be as a state representative. Last thing I'll say is that along with everybody else's literature, my cards are on the table in the back there. My website is on there and my phone number is on there. If you call that phone number, you're not getting a staff, you're not getting an office, you're getting me. If I can't take your call because I'm on the phone all day, please leave a message. I will get back to you and I'll be happy to talk to you, whether you agree with me or not. So with that, I'll take questions. Yes?
My question is, and it seems to be a repeating theme with Republicans, and you're Republican, is that you value freedom of choice.
Yes.
But it seems to me that the line is always drawn when it becomes a choice that a woman needs to make. You're in favor of doctors making decisions based on their medical knowledge, and yet you're taking away, and I'm using this broadly, not you personally, the decision for a woman to discuss with her doctor what is the best decision to make in the case of abortion. And I don't see how the two sit. You cannot be freedom of choice and then taking away my choice.
I understand where you're coming from. And so I'm going to say that I also believe that it's because there is another person involved. Somebody asked the question earlier, what's the difference between a fetus and a baby? And I would argue that the difference may be whether it's wanted. And that's tragic. So,
It's not that.
so I think we are so divided on this, and people are kind of running to both extreme ends of the room. I am pro-life. I do believe that life begins at conception, and I do believe that this is a human rights issue for the child. Okay, that's my position. I understand it's not your position. But where we also are is that, we had a bill come forward in 2021 that was essentially New Hampshire's Born Alive bill. In other words, if a woman goes in for an abortion and the child is born alive, this bill would have established that that child now, a separate living, breathing human, independent of its mother, deserves to have medical care. What happened when we brought that bill forward is that the proponents of choice, I'll use that terminology, ran for the doors, literally. Because they knew that they had just lost another abortion vote, and they didn't want there to be a quorum, and they didn't want to take a vote on that. I have a problem with sort of there is some middle ground. If you are a single issue voter and you're pro-choice, you're probably never going to vote for me, okay? But I feel like we have to have a conversation, and the conversation has to not be us yelling at each other. And that applies to everything.
And choice is choice, and you cannot decide which is freedom of choice and which is not. And if you're talking about viability, the spark of life is not viable for many, many weeks. It is not going to sustain outside of a woman's body. So there needs to be middle ground, I agree, but a choice is a choice.
That is a legitimate conversation to have. I've told you where my position is. I hear where your position is. What I would hope is that we, as Americans, could sit down and have that conversation without tearing each other apart.
just want to take a stretch break, or you'd like a 5-minute break? I don't know how bodies are feeling in these nice hard chairs. Just want to stand up and stretch for 5 minutes, or you want to keep going?
Keep going.
All right. We'll keep going. All right. Is Richard Swanson here? House Representative, Democratic Party.
I think a lot of the speakers here have done a great job working without notes, but I need to use my notes. I took some time to prepare them in advance. It'll at least make me feel more comfortable. Yesterday I read that a U.S. Senator was predicting that if something didn't go his way, there would be rioting in the streets. Yikes. Clearly, some people in our government have abandoned the idea of collaboration, and I applaud Jim's remarks on collaboration. And I think we need to do what we can at the local level to turn this around and find some balance. The things that connect us are more important than the things that divide us. And I think we're all here, and all the candidates are here because they sincerely want to do the best for their communities. And I think that's why we're all here. How many people are here from New Ipswich? I'd like to use some of my time to just ask people to chime in 2 or 3 words with what are concerns for them in New Ipswich? What's on their mind?
Energy costs.
Mm-hmm.
Inflation in general.
Inflation, energy costs, inflation.
Reasonable candidates for democracy.
Reasonable candidates for democracy.
School vouchers.
School vouchers.
Second Amendment.
Second Amendment.
Open borders.
What's that?
Open borders on the southern border.
Open borders.
I mean, close those borders.
Closing the borders.
Healthcare.
Healthcare.
Providing some of the farm legislation.
Not taxing people for solar installations
Not taxing people for solar installation.
in this town.
In New Ipswich.
Yeah.
Marijuana.
New Hampshire state school funding equity amongst all the townships.
School funding equity.
Providing some of the farm legislation.
What's that?
Farm bill legislation.
Defining farm bill legislation. Refining farm bill legislation.
Getting CRT out of schools. Getting CRT out of the schools.
Getting CRT out of the schools.
We work in the town office. Really? You do not?
I jotted down a few things also that I thought I might hear too. Safety, family, making ends meet, young people staying in town rather than leaving when they get out of school, affordable health care, inflation, electric bills, home prices, clean water, extreme weather events. I worry about that a lot. Good schools, local businesses, local heritage, freedom, privacy. Thanks for chiming in with some of those ideas. I've also been knocking on doors in New Ipswich to find out what people are thinking and to introduce myself. And I plan to do some more of that. I was a selectman for 3 years in Wilton. I served with Kermit Williams, and it was a privilege to do so. And it's also a privilege to be running with Michael DeLauria for this office. And it was an honor to hear him talk. And it's a privilege to be running with Jim Kofal too, running on the ballot with him. So some of my issues, education is at the top of the list. And I do think we need to have the best schools in the country if we're going to attract good businesses. Because I think businesses, even before they ask about the tax rate, if they're going to locate in a town, they ask how the schools are. And I think it's our choice. We can spend the money on schools or we can spend it on jails and substance abuse treatment and welfare. And I prefer to spend it on schools because, you know, I believe in education. And I think we need to pay our teachers a living wage. I noticed in the Keene Sentinel today, one of the front page issues was on schools are facing teacher shortages. And my wife's a teacher. It's a rough time to be a teacher. They just came through COVID. They had to do this virtual learning and hybrid learning. And they really don't get paid enough. And also, they're starting to have to worry about getting threatened about what they teach. And so that's what some of these remarks about critical race are, that this divisive concepts legislation. But what that means, I think, is censorship. And I don't think it's right to censor teachers in what they teach. Teaching history is about critical thinking, and it's about tough topics. And sometimes that can even be divisive, and sometimes it can be uniting. Another of my topics is energy. And I know we're all getting shocked by our electric bills. And I'm of the opinion that energy costs are skyrocketing because we're being left behind in New England and the rest of the country on renewable energy. And when fossil fuels get expensive, we don't have alternatives. And also the renewable energy is clean, and it can prevent us from having more climate change, more extreme weather. The issues involved with that are huge. People having to leave their homes, mass migration. I also think that renewable energy will create job opportunities and startup businesses, and I hope they come to New Hampshire because we're providing an environment that's right for renewable energy. Healthcare. I heard healthcare, and I think that's a big one. I worked for 15 years in the community health center field. I don't know how many people are familiar with community health centers. There's not one in this part of the state. There is one in Fitchburg, across the border. But it's about health care for all. And it's a concept that's popular on both sides of the aisle. Let's say the Democrats like it because it seems like the right thing to do for common good. Republicans like it because it's a good investment. If you do preventive health, it keeps people out of the emergency room where they cost a lot more money to treat. And I think the state can do a lot for affordable health care. I promise to protect women's abortion rights in New Hampshire if I'm elected. I had the privilege a couple of times to see Sandra Day O'Connor talk. And when she graduated from law school in 1952, she had trouble finding a job because she was a woman. She got her first law job by offering to work for free. She went on to become an Arizona State Legislature senator, and then the majority leader. And then I think we all know that in 1981, President Reagan appointed her to be the first female justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. And I remember being inspired by her talking about how when she was a majority leader, she had a regular habit of inviting people from both parties over to her house and having barbecues. And I hope to see the New Hampshire legislature return to some of that balance and stability. So I'm probably an underdog in this district because of the way it was redrawn. But I think I can get elected, and I need your vote if you live in New Ipswich or Temple or Wilton. And if I'm elected, my intention is to represent everybody, not just the blue votes, not just the red votes, not just the taxpayers, because people that don't pay taxes, like kids, for example, need the representation too. And a final note that I'd like to close on: when I was driving here today, I went by one of those church signs, and it said, "Don't wish for it, work for it." And that was a pretty good message to take here. We have time for a couple questions.
You talk about schools and spending. How are you going to protect families with large tax bills with the spending that you're proposing?
Well, I think that's a big issue in New Hampshire, because the state legislature, in cutting taxes, has been pushing the tax burden down to the local level. And as a selectman in Wilton, I was really committed to not raising taxes, and we're getting slammed on our property tax bills. But by the money we didn't get from the state government, and it is in the Constitution to provide for an adequate education, and fair funding, I think, is part of that. We really had to cut in other areas to provide an adequate education at an affordable tax rate.
Yep. That you're talking about getting the money from the state. Again, where is the money coming from? It's coming from people, whether it's property taxes, it's still coming from us. So,
well, I know people, the state legislature has been talking about cutting some taxes, like the corporate tax and the interest dividend tax, and even the state property tax for education, and that's just taking money away from education.
yeah, but when those taxes are lowered, then prices go down, which makes it easier for me and my family to be able to live. So you're still talking about taking money from working families to give even more money to bloated school budgets. How many administrators, what is the amount, the ratio of administrators to teachers to students in the state?
Well, if the ratio is tilted too heavily in favor of administrators, the money's going mostly to administrators, we're not making a good investment, because teachers are where it's at. You know, they're the ones that are educating our kids. They're the ones that have the training to do it.
So how about looking with a microscope at school budgets and cutting those school budgets and then leaving tax cuts for those for New Hampshire families so that we can survive? You
Well,
can't just keep taking money and not look at what it's being spent on.
yeah, I think we should not think of things in terms of costs. We should think of terms of investments. I think we should cut costs where we can, but we should make investments where it makes sense to, including in our schools. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Richard. Do we have Shane Sirios here? And if I didn't pronounce it right, please correct me.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shane Searle. I don't have a prepared speech, but I do have bullet notes, so I don't forget anything. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out, and all the citizens and everything, and all the candidates as well, Democrats, Republicans, and stepping up. Thank you for stepping up. It's an important time. It doesn't matter what your values are, what your stances are. You're fighting for what you believe in, and if you don't do that, then it's worthless. Like you're a complainer. You're doing something about what you believe in, and that's why you're all here. And I appreciate you very much. So, myself, I've been very concerned with the path of the way this country's going, things that are spilling over into our great state. I mean, I love New Hampshire with all my heart, and I've become very concerned with what I think are just some pretty bad evils that are spilling over. So, I prayed on it one night, and I said, outside of my ministry, God, what more can I do to help keep our country safe from these evils and these things that I don't like that are being pushed on our citizens and our children. The very next day, a former state rep called me on the phone or actually messaged me and said, hey, you ever think about running for office? And I was like, I was just talking to God about that last night. And, and here he goes, So that was the sign. Whether I win or not, God wanted me to go through this for a reason, so here I am. So my wife has lived here in New Ipswich most of her life. She also has lived in Temple, but between New Ipswich and Temple is where she's resided her whole entire life. I've been here for about 12 and a half years. I have 3 daughters. I have a son who's 11, who's in this school district in New Ipswich, and I have a stepson, and we have 10 grandchildren. So one thing that I believe in strongly is integrity. If you're sitting in office, if you hold an office, you must have integrity. So I believe in saying what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do what I'm going to say. I'm not going to change it as I go. So what you're going to hear from me tonight is exactly what I intend to do, and that's what I'm going to do. And you may not agree with it, but I'm telling you right now so you can make up your decision for your vote. And I can already tell some of you may not agree with what I have to say, but I come with a genuine heart and a care and a love for where we live. So first I want to address our Second Amendment, gun rights. I am a huge pro-gun advocate. I believe that every state should be constitutional carry. Because I just believe so in our Constitution should not be changed, should not be altered, should not be defiled. And that's what's being done through this wokeism in cancel culture. And we're forgetting about our founding fathers, and I'm not going to stand for that. I'll fight for our Constitution, our Second Amendment rights. Out of all the candidates here for state rep here tonight, the ones that took the NRA test, only 2 of us have got a perfect score. Think about that. So if you are pro-gun, one wrong vote on a ballot could take away some of your gun rights. Think about that. Just one wrong vote. So only 2 of us had a perfect score. So if you like guns, you may want to consider that. Do your homework on incumbents or whatever. And there's other surveys that candidates are doing that have never served in office, have never voted in office. You can still go and look at some of those surveys and see how they intend to vote. But if you are pro-gun, keep that in mind. I also scored a perfect score with the New Hampshire Firearms Coalition. Another thing I want to say about, me and my wife just talked about this. Our government some of our government, are trying to strip us from our right to carry and bear arms. But yet they are arming our IRS. Doesn't that trouble you? I mean, seriously, doesn't that throw a huge question mark? It's just disturbing to me.
The government has the right to bear arms, and what's wrong with people who work for the IRS having the right to bear arms?
No, but ma'am, I'm saying I'm all for carrying. What I'm saying is they're trying to take my guns, but have them the right to, bear arms, but I can't have them. That's what I'm talking about. We should all have the right, unless you're a criminal, unless you're a felon, you're a convicted criminal. We should all have the right to carry and bear arms because that's what we're bound by. And another thing I want to say too, this is a school night. I'm going to do questions, but I'm going to do them after. I'm going to stick around. My son needs to go home and everything else like that. I want to do one-on-one questions with you guys because I can already tell some of you are passionate. You're not going to agree with what I have to say. And I'm going to agree with Jim about this too, Jim Kofal, it's so important. Like, we're not going to agree on things. We don't have to. I don't have to agree with you. You don't have to agree with me. But it's so important. So if I can have an intimate conversation, I've been being attacked by people that are not in my parties, voters, not people in office, and they've been emailing me or calling me and stuff like that, and attacking me. And I said, all right, let's have a conversation, And I tell them, we don't have to agree, but I want to hear your story. We all have a life story, right, that landed us on how we perceive and how we judge each issue, right? It's based on the life that we lived, and we all live different lives. So I'm not going to judge you on your stance, and don't judge me on mine, but let me understand. So that's why I want to do one-on-one after. Let me understand how you feel about the way you feel about a certain issue. What landed you in that position, and I'll tell you mine. And when we can both understand each other, we can have a more productive conversation, and we'll have some kind of respect for one another. And that's the way we should be governing. And that's another reason why I want to run, because I do not like this back and forth fighting, hate, attacking you, attacking me. It's not productive. And our country should be productive. We should be able to work together. And what's going on right now is just disgusting. So we need to pull back together. We don't have to agree, and that's what voting's for. That's what, I am pro-life. I am well, first of all, I didn't tell you, I'm a justice of the peace for New Hampshire. I am also a Christian minister, so my faith, I am strong pro-life because of that. But looking at it at a science angle, in my body, my choice, I do have to say, I know this is going to strike up some nerves, but I'm just telling you how I feel, like when I read into this a little bit. It's really not your body. Because the human zygote, the newly formed human zygote is a fertilized egg that creates a cell that has a composition unique to itself. It's unlike any other composition in this world. There's nothing like it, even of its own mother. So it is not the mother's body. And it is its own unique composition. And I do believe that God knew you before you were born, before you were in the womb. Voter integrity is huge. I know some people will say that our elections were not faulty, but I'm going to tell you something that they were, and even in New Hampshire they were, and there's proof of that. And you can reach out to me, and I'll give you a link so you can view that. You can watch 2,000 Mules or whatever. That's all real. I mean, there was huge problems, and we're gonna get mad because we're saying no, but let me tell you something. Voter fraud's been happening a long time. It just happened greater in 2020. Greater than it ever has. But it's been happening a long time. So don't be fooled. But I'm going to fight in every way I can to make sure that I'm aware of every voting policy in every area, even outside of our district. I mean, I'm going to put us first, but I'm going to look outward and see how they're voting. If it's hand counted. I want to make sure that voter ID, you have to present an ID or you can't vote. And if you are submitting your vote elsewhere, you have to apply for that with a proof, photo ID. Otherwise, you can't vote. Constitution is everything to me as well. I hate, and everybody in this room, if we are all patriots, doesn't matter if we're Democrat or Republican, we are all patriots. If we agree that we love this nation that we live in, then we should all hate cancel culture. They're trying to defile the Constitution. They're trying to change or delete our history that made us what we are. Can't we agree that that's just not right? It doesn't matter if we like or dislike what happened in the past. And in the school, it's the same thing. Teach history the way it was. Don't change it. Don't delete it. Don't cancel it. It's our history. It's important. We have a huge opioid problem in this country. New Hampshire was, I think, #1 for a while. I think we've done, you know, a little bit of a job to kind of reverse that, but it's still a huge problem. And human trafficking as well. And I don't know if you guys are aware, a big part of that obviously is the illegals that are being brought over. They're being bussed over, and it's being funded by George Soros and other organizations, and that's a fact. And I don't know if you're aware, but thousands upon thousands, I think the number was like 4,000 or 6,000 that were bussed into Nashua. They were being put up in hotels until they were given housing. And that's going to lead me into something else too that drives me nuts. So we're funding the illegals coming over, we're busing them in, we're giving them nice hotel rooms until we put them in housing, we're giving them food, we're giving them gift cards to go shopping, and our veterans are still on the streets. If that doesn't make you upset, so people, you know, they want to defend this current agenda to the point that they're going to forget about the people that fought for us. I believe in right to work. I don't believe that any company should be, or that any employee should be put in a position to where they are forced into joining a union at the expense of their job. If an employer decides to go union, it should be up to the employee if he or she wants to pay union dues, and they should be able to keep their job either way. I believe in our law enforcement. I believe that it's needed. I despise the act of defunding, and I think the whole defunding narrative was done for a reason. I think there was a point where chaos was actually, there was a certain political agenda that they wanted chaos, they wanted division. And I think they wanted to defund our police to continue to make that happen, to benefit them in a horrible way. I love our law enforcement. I'm going to always stand up for them, and our military. And of course, we're going to have people in all walks of life, in all jobs. There's going to be problems where people that aren't good people, they make a mistake, they do something horrible, they get too full of themselves. I mean, it's going to happen. But if you look at the amount of police officers in this country and the amount of issues, it's very slim that something bad happens. But you gotta expect that. There's a negative and positive to everything, and most of all, our law enforcement in this country, they're doing it for the right reasons. They're doing it to protect and serve, and they're, you know, and they're good people. We're gonna have issues, but to attack them all for one, but I think if we attack our law enforcement, we defund, we take our police departments and we cut them in half, we're having more issues happen. And that was by design, and we can't have that. One of the biggest things that made me want to run, and this gentleman here says CRT is not in our schools. It may not be in these schools, but it is being pushed in schools, and I know that for a fact. I don't want it to come to these schools, okay? So it's a horrible thing. I don't like what they're doing to our children. They're brainwashing our children. I don't like the LGBTQ coloring books in our school. I'm not against gay people homosexual, whatever all the designations are. I'm not against anyone. That's between you and God and what you do. It doesn't matter to me, okay? But when you start sexualizing and indoctrinating my children, that's when I have a problem. They are in school to learn curriculum, and that's what you do as a teacher. Leave your personal life in your bedroom and teach my children curriculum. And I believe that teachers are good people, but there are some that are using this freedom that they've been granted through this new narrative to run free with what they believe and what they want, and they are brainwashing our children. And that's a fact. There are kids in 12th grade that don't even know what they want as a career when they grow up. They have a hard time figuring it out. But the teachers are trying to task them figuring out what sex they want to be and what sex they're interested in when they're 6 and 7 years old. Yes, it is true. Yes, it is, Laura. Yes, it is. So, I mean, until I'm done, I didn't seem like that long. But anyway, so I'm not running for a title. I hold favorite titles already. That of husband, dad, Pepe, and a Christian. I'm running for my family. I'm running for In God We Trust. I'm running for Live Free or Die. I'm running for We the People. And I'm running for every single one of you. And I'm running to save our freedoms. On September 13th, I'd be honored to receive your vote. And I'd be honored to talk to you afterwards. I'll be up there.
Thank you, Shane. All right, we have Kermit Williams, from the Democratic for State Representative.
So I want to thank you all for attending tonight. I think I'm maybe the last speaker. I'm really happy that you've all stuck in this long. I'm happy for whoever turned that fan on, because it made it at least a little bit cooler in here. And I want to thank all the candidates for speaking. Whether I agree with everything you said or not, really doesn't matter. You should express your own opinions, and that's what we heard tonight. But I also want to thank the Board of Selectmen for hosting this event, and the town administrator for putting it all together. So I'm the current chair of the Wilton Select Board, and so I know how hard you guys all work, and your town administrator. Running a small town, keeping property taxes low and services high is never easy. But New Ipswich is a beautiful place, and I've met some wonderful people here. And I know you have some great employees, and one of them is your police chief, Mike Abel. And I know he's good because he got most of his training in Wilton. You're welcome. But I'm here to talk about being a state rep. So I served as a rep in my old district for 8 years, starting in 2013. And all of that time, I was on the Committee on Commerce and Consumer Affairs. And part of that time as the vice chair. I've heard a lot of passion tonight. I've heard a lot of people talking about things that they would love to be able to do, change the world. The truth is that most of what we do in the state legislature, and I've served, again, probably longer than all the other people here put together, it isn't all that exciting. And there are 400 state reps. So any one person's individual opportunity to change the world is pretty limited. But one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that most of the work of the legislature actually doesn't happen on the floor of the State House. It happens in the committees. And committees are 20 people who get together to talk about a particular subject. And that's where an individual has real influence. Because on voting days, you have 400 people. If everybody talked about a bill, we'd be there all week. So the legislature listens usually to the recommendations of the committee that originally heard the bill. So the Commerce Committee, the one that I served on, is actually the busiest policy committee. It hears most of the bills about business, hears about insurance, hears about corporations and trusts, the State Liquor Commission, all kinds of business issues. In my time in the legislature, I wrote quite a few bills. And mostly, I wrote ones heard by the Commerce Committee because I could sell them to my fellow committee members. One of my efforts was on bills that balance the playing field between big businesses, which are mostly actually based in other states, and local small businesses. I wrote bills that help small businesses work with the Liquor Commission, because, again, the Commerce Committee does all the liquor bills. One bill, for example, let very small wineries and breweries, places where they don't really have the time or the ambition to want to run a restaurant along with making a good beer, to sell glasses of the product that they make instead of just giving away free samples, which is what they were required to do before. I also wrote bills for the Consumer Affairs part of the committee, including one that ensures that the gift card that you get and then put in a drawer and forget about would never expire. So I don't have time to tell you about everything that I worked on, but I want to tell you about one particular bill. I put a lot of effort in this bill because it's the kind of thing that I believe in and would work on again. And it's not really exciting, but it was certainly exciting to the people and it affected. I met some people who came to our committee who owned auto body shops in New Hampshire. They told me how hard it was to hire workers because the insurance companies would intentionally keep the hourly rates for body work very low. Insurance company would pay an auto dealer who does the mechanical work when your car is damaged as much as $150 an hour or more, because that's what car dealers get. But they would only pay the body shop $35 or $40 for the sheet metal work that was just as important as any of the mechanical work. They could do that because when you go to a dealer, most of the time you're paying the dealer directly, but almost all car repair, body work, car repair, is paid for by insurance companies because that's why you have insurance. You have an accident, you go to your insurance company. So if you had an accident today, you might find it would take months to get your car fixed. And that's because every shop in New Hampshire is understaffed, because they can't afford to pay what a worker can get in Massachusetts or Maine or other states. So the bill that I wrote set a regional rate for repairs so that those small businesses had a fighting chance to succeed. I had a lot of co-sponsors, both Republicans and Democrats. The bill passed the legislature by an overwhelming bipartisan margin. But then the governor vetoed it because his friends in the insurance industry asked him to. So we almost overrode the veto, which is a two-thirds vote, requires a two-thirds vote, which definitely required people on both sides. And we actually missed that by one vote. So I tell this story because I think it's important for someone to look out for small businesses and the consumers who need their services. So if I'm re-elected, I will work on bills like this again. I hope that the rest of you who are running will also consider this kind of focus as well, because someone's got to care about these things too. You might ask why I want to go back to the legislature after having already been there for 8 years. Well, I think that experience matters. In my first term as a rep, I had no idea what I was doing. There is no education offered, there's no training. All you can do is learn by doing, and you make mistakes and you move on. If you want someone in the legislature who can help you when you need it, and one of the things along with passing bills and having policies and wanting to do this and that a good legislator does is help his constituents. I've helped people get through to the unemployment office. I've helped people who've had problems with a divorce. I mean, I've done a lot of different things where if you need to talk to somebody in state government, your legislator is the best person to do that, because we have small districts, and so therefore you can get personal attention from them. So If you want somebody who can help you, if that time ever comes, I would hope you consider voting for me. Thank you all for listening. I'd be happy to answer questions in whatever time I have left.
So you said that you were on the Finance Committee?
No, Commerce and Consumer Affairs.
So does that have anything at all to do with the taxes that we pay? Or does that have to do with spending money?
Well, no, it doesn't have to do with either one of those things. Because, so there's a finance committee that kind of sets the state budget, and there are other committees that deal with taxes. What Commerce has to do with is how you set the rules for how businesses can function. And like I said, you know, that there's a lot of unbalance between, say, a really big company like an insurance company and a really small company like an auto body firm, which is usually a family-run business with half a dozen employees.
So you set regulations?
So we set regulations, yes.
Okay. So in your position, do you look to deregulate to make it easier for businesses to operate, especially smaller businesses?
So deregulation, if you just say, well, we're just going to get rid of regulations, it means you're taking something away that helps one person to help another person. So, like I said, we have regulations, we try to put regulations in place for insurance companies because most of the insurance companies are from some other state, but they sell insurance to you. They sell insurance to your employer. They sell insurance to the businesses that you go to. And so if we deregulate insurance companies, then they can make more money, but the money that they're making is going to come from you and from your neighbors and from the businesses that you use. So regulation is always a balance. You don't want to have too much regulation, but you also don't want to have too little. All right, I think you guys want to go home. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Kermit. We are not done. So is Warren Ojula in the room? Warren is going to speak on behalf of Philip Andrews, who's running as a Republican for state representative.
This here will be just kind of short and sweet. Hello, I'm Warren Ojula, a neighbor of Phil Andrews. He lived not too far down the hill for several years on, across the way here, and he moved over to Thayer Road about three years ago. He is unable to be here tonight and asked if I would read a statement for him. Here are his words. When a people become more afraid of its government than its enemies, a change in leaders is necessary. Over the past 2 years, we have seen what can happen with unrestrained government. One who can enact emergency orders with the stroke of a pen and no accountability. In 2020, it was demanded that you no longer worship or congregate, and you are not allowed to make a decision for yourself. Your First Amendment rights were eliminated without your consent. We have seen the government weaponize against its people agencies that were created to protect the weak, used to attack and silence opposition. There were cases of children being targeted by medical and government officials to be taken away from their parents, not because of a history of abuse or data about mistreatment, but merely because the government officials disagreed with their medical choices. When we become a people who needed to be ruled over than the state and country of independent thinkers, we've allowed our government to grow beyond recognition to an entity that thrives on restrictions, regulations, and infractions. I propose the 2023-2024 cycle of the New Hampshire House be dedicated to protecting citizens from their government. Let's start by restraining emergency powers. Your natural, inalienable rights are not subject to the expediency of the moment. Any actions taken during an emergency must be strictly related to planning of state resources and making recommendations to the public. We do not consent to our rights being voided. The government may make recommendations, but no recommendations during a state of emergency should have force of law. No law enforcement officer should be enforcing an emergency order against citizens. We do not consent to our rights being put on hiatus to the convenience of our officials. We trust that parents provide a safe home for their children. We should trust those same parents with decisions about the medical and educational choices for their children. No government agency should infringe on the rights of a parent to do what is the best interest of their child. No medical procedure should be performed on a child without the parent's informed consent.
All right, thank you, Warren. Stan?
Yes, well, this question is for you, actually. Relating to the pertinence of a claim made by a few speakers ago about election fraud. You're a man of high integrity. I've known you for years. You probably have more integrity than anybody else. Is there any fraud in any election that you've run into?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
All right, is Charles Page present? Charles is not on the ballot in September, however, he is on the ballot in November. And since I don't believe we'll have another opportunity for him to speak, and later this week he will be a Republican, I'm invited him to speak as well.
Thanks, Bob. Good evening, everybody. My name is Charles Page. I'm new to all this. This is my first rodeo. I was interested in doing this because of about a year or so ago, the way the country was going. I was at my local gym. I spoke with the owner there, and I was discussing what's going on with our country with all these mandates and lockdowns and just everything that was going on. It just seemed crazy, like it's not America. What's happened to our country? She gave me Paul Summers' number, who is the current rep, and said, you know, give him a call, see what you can do. So I did, and one of the first things he said was, well, you should run for office. I was saying, no, that's not really me, but as I discussed it with him further and made some calls, and I met with him again, and then I said, you know, he's right. It needs to be changed at a local level. So this is where I am at this point and why I'm here. So at this point, I agree with so much that was said tonight. And I want to make this short and sweet. Tomorrow's the first day of school. And I have someone at home, well, with me that I need to get to bed. And anyway, so my stance on most of these things is I'm pretty conservative, and I want to hold the federal government accountable. I mean, they have to act within the Constitution. They can't just trounce all over the Constitution like what's been going on. Our First, Second, Fourth Amendment rights are getting crushed, and we need to act. And it's just, I just felt so impotent that I needed to do something, and that's why I'm here. So I'm interested too because I have a daughter who goes to school in the Messina School District. I want to make sure she's got a good future going on, along with all of us. It's our government, and we have the say, not them. I mean, 87,000 new IRS agents supposedly have been hired. That doesn't give me a warm, fuzzy feel. That's a scary kind of scenario. Like, why? So, as I said, I have conservative viewpoints, and I'm running as an independent. And
State rep.
so I'm state rep. I thought that was said in the very beginning. So, okay. Anyhow, so I'm a New Hampshire state rep that is running for office, or I'm running for New Hampshire state rep. Okay. So that's it in a nutshell. I mean, I volunteered. This is public service. I volunteered as a basketball coach, a baseball coach, a soccer coach. So I've worked with Parks and Rec. I volunteer as a chaperone. And then when the school bus crisis happened and my daughter couldn't get to games, I became a school bus driver so I could get kids in the Conant and the Scenic District to games. And I just trying to do the right thing by everyone, and that's why I'm here. So anyway, thank you very much. Is there a quick question by someone? All right, yes, sir.
I've been listening all night to rights, freedoms, and vaccination. So my question to you is, where would we be if we had these vaccination debates when we were refused to get when we were fighting polio, smallpox? Polio now is coming back. We said we'll never come back again because we would be sure that people were vaccinated. They were just polio in their water.
Right. Well,
when do you decide the greater good versus the individual priority? If one person is not vaccinated, anybody around that person is in that sphere of contagion and contagion. So how do we make this thing say, oh, I don't want to be vaccinated? We can't say to that person, we won't say the American will. I'm sorry, you can go stay in that 8x8 corner. So if a child, parents decide they don't want that child vaccinated, all the children in that school are at risk. Now I hear about school choice, and school choice is a bunch of baloney. I'm sorry. If you give someone a voucher, that voucher does not pay for the entire education of that child at church. So already, someone said it earlier, you already have to be at this income level before you can even take advantage of it. Joan and Joe might live side by side, have the same grades, have the same whatever, but have different family incomes. The charter school uses a lottery. They don't have to take a college.
all right, so is your question, it's about the vaccine. So,
Is the vaccine and all
right.
this where?
Well, you know, typically, first of all, I don't think it should be forced on you. We're in America, it's not China. You know, you can't be, you know, get this or else. Get this or you're going to jail, or you can't work, or you can't go to here, or you can't go there.
That has nothing to do with nationality. If polio took your son because it was exposed to
Right, and polio, that vaccine was vetted, probably took 10 years or more. Correct? So a typical medication takes about a 10-year vetting process. And this was rushed out, and everybody had to get the shot because you were afraid. They fear-mongered everything.
Fear had nothing to do with
Okay. Well, we'll have to agree to disagree, sir. But thank you. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you, Charles. All right, we have one more candidate here tonight because we have no candidates for sheriff, county attorney, county treasurer, but we do have one for register of deeds, and this is Dennis Hogan.
Thank you for having me. My name is Dennis Hogan. I'm running for Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds. The New Hampshire Constitution requires us certain county officials to be elected. I'm sure when they wrote the Constitution, they were thinking that they would limit the amount of power that the governor had to, assign jobs, and probably they limited the power of the county officials as well. So, over the years, of course, Hillsborough County and New Hampshire has grown a lot, and so instead of being one person doing the job, it's become a situation where there's a department that does the job, and the person you're voting for is a manager, middle manager, or leader of that department. So, the question is to you, why would you hire me to be a middle manager in the county? And the reason is, I kind of have two categories. First, as an attorney for the last 20 years in private practice, I have had reason to help my clients use the Registry of Deeds to file their deeds, of course, and sometimes I have clients who have damages and we need to search the Registry of Deeds to see if there's any property there from the person who did the damage that we might use to pay off the damage for my client. So it's a good thing to be someone who is interacting with the department as a consumer to know what it does and whether it does it well. But also, I have been this is the second part, I have been an executive of the county before. I was elected 3 times, so served 6 years as the Hillsborough County Attorney. And in that, I learned to do some of the things that the same skills are needed for the Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds. That is, hiring and sometimes firing employees, making a budget, which I then present to the executive committee of the county delegation and the county commissioners, and that sort of process. So it's a thing that I have, between those two things, I think you're getting somebody who has a great deal of experience that can do the job of Hillsborough County Register of Deeds. And that's usually all I say, but since some people seem interested in it, I'll just tell you a little bit about my background. I was born and raised in New Hampshire. I went to schools in New Hampshire. I'm a graduate of the University of New Hampshire in Durham. And 12 years between then and when I went to law school, I worked for a Fortune 500 company, and I think importantly, I got some management training on management. Then I went to the University of New Hampshire Law School, which at the time was not called University of New Hampshire, it was Franklin Pierce Law Center in Concord. So I think you can go home and let your family know you heard about, or friends, that you heard about somebody who will make a very good Hillsborough County Register of Deeds. And that guy's name is Dennis Hogan, and I appreciate you both. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I will be amazed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Are there any other candidates here who came to speak and have not spoken? Well, then I would like to thank everyone for their attendance this evening, your courtesy, and your questions. And again, the election is on Tuesday, September 13th. The voting hours will be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for New Ipswich. And you enter at the rear of the auditorium, not the auditorium, the rear of the gymnasium at the back of the building. We'll see you then. Thank you very much.
I know.
because I just I tell you what. Do you do that? Oh, so you
No, I just work.
don't, you just write down the information.